today in the Zuchus of a Refuah Shalema for a little girl who's having surgery today. Leah Bas Frida, she should have a Refuah Shalema. We're on DAF Tzadi Aleph Amid Aleph, and we had seen yesterday a statement of Rav Yehuda who tries to sort of wrap up and quantify the machlokes, the three-way machlokes that exists in our Mishnah between Rabbi Meir, the Chachamim, and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Meir says that you can transfer from Gag to Gag, you can transfer from one like domain to another like domain, but you cannot transfer, and Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that you can do this even if the owners are completely disparate, like from one Gag to another Gag. And he says that you can do this because he holds that it has the din. Well, right. In other words, we've been explaining this all along. It has the separate gagos are somewhat disassociated from the residents that are down below, and that's what enables you. Just like you can transfer from a public chutzner to another, to a publicly owned chutzner to another publicly owned chutzner, you can transfer from one gag to another gag. What you cannot do, according to Reb Meir, is transfer from a gag to a chutzner. And the reason is because of this concern of Teil b'Rishus Harabim, this mound of earth in Rishus Harabim that is Rishus HaYachid. If we allow you to move from a one logistic location to another that are disparate logistically and physically, then you may come to do that from a Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYachid as well. The Chachamim hold that while you're not allowed to transfer from one Gag to another Gag because they take into account the disparate residents that are below the Gagos, they do, however, say that you can transfer from one domain to another domain, provided that either they're owned by the same person or that they are two publicly owned domains that only have a din of a carmelis that are enclosed. So, for example, you can transfer from a gag to a chutzner and from a chutzner back to a gag. And they don't have that concern that Rabbi Meir has about Teil b'Rishus Harabim. They will, however, hold that you cannot transfer from one gag to another gag because of the separate, disparate residents that dwell beneath the gagos. And finally, we have the third opinion, which is the opinion of Reb Shimon, who says that all enclosed Carmelios, that all enclosed Carmelis domains, you can transfer from one to the other. And that includes from a Gag to a Chutzner, from a Chutzner to a Gag, from a Gag to a Karfei, from a Karfei to a Chutzner. And as we'll see, Mavui is included in that as well. Mavui will have the same din, is that even though it has a different utility from the other Carmelios that we've been discussing, you're allowed to transfer from one to the other. Now, everything that we've said up until now is in reference to Kalim Sheshavsu, that utensils that at the inception of Shabbos were in the Carmelis, were in the Gag, were in the Chutzner, were in the Karfei. The only thing that Reb Shimon says that you cannot transfer are items that were in a bias, that were in a house, in a real Rishus HaYachid. Those cannot be transferred out into any outside Chutzner where an Eruv was not made with that house. So, with that in mind, the Gemara now is going to tell us we have a brisa to support both Rav and Rav Yehuda. Now, Rav that we're going to be discussing now is the Rav that we learned initially 2 days ago. The Rav who says that according to the Chachamim, who say that you're only allowed to carry within the one Gag itself, you cannot transfer from one Gag to another Gag. We talked about a situation where the walls of the building are not visible from the rooftop. And in that situation, Rab says you do not say good asik mechitzta. We do not imagine the walls going up, and therefore you cannot carry more than Dalet Amos on the rooftop when the walls are not visible. So therefore the Gemara now is going to just tell us we have a brisa to support Rav and a brisa to support Rav Yehuda. Tanya Kavase de Rav, Tanya Kavase de Rav Yehuda. Tanya Kavase de Rav, the brisa to support Rav, who says that when the walls are not visible from the rooftop, you cannot carry more than Dalet Amos according to the Chachamim. The Brisa says as follows: Kol Gagos Ha'ir Rishus Echasei. Now this is first, we're citing the opinion of Rabbi Meir. All rooftops are considered to be one collective domain according to Rabbi Meir. Va'asr lahalos u'lahorid min hagagin l'chatzer min hachatzer l'gagin. But what you are not allowed to do according to Rabbi Meir is to transfer from a Gag to a Chatzer, from a Chatzer to a Gag, as we said, because of the concern of Teil b'Rishus Harabim. V'kelim sheshavsu b'chatzer mutal l'taltalan b'chatzer, b'gagin mutal l'taltalan b'gagin. And therefore, if you have utensils that at the inception of Shabbos started off in a chutzner, you're allowed to move them from chutzner to chutzner. And if you have utensils that at the inception of Shabbos were on the rooftop, you can move them from one gag to the other. Provided this proviso is, as far as transferring from one gag to another, you cannot have a transferal from a gag that is lower or higher than 10 tfachim from the other gag. And again, it's the same concern of Teil Bereshus Harabim. This is all according to Divrei Reb Meir, according to Reb Meir. Now let's look at the Chachamim, however, and this is where we're bringing our proof to Rav. The Chachamim omrim kol echad ve'echad reshus la'atzmo. Each rooftop is considered to be its own separate domain, according to the Chachamim, because of the disparate residents that dwell below the roof. Ve'ein metaltalin bo ela bedalid, and furthermore, because you cannot see the walls, and this is really what the Gemara is inferring from here, you do not say gud asik mechitzta, and therefore you cannot even carry on top of one roof more than daled amos. Okay? Now, Tanya, so this proves Rav's point. Now, if you'll recall, and this is why you have to do a lot of Rashi reading on this Gemara, if you recall, yesterday we said that when you can see the walls, according to Rav, you do say gud asik mechitzta, and you are allowed to carry throughout the gag, even more than daled amos. So remember, this is only according to a case where you cannot see the walls because the roof protrudes over the walls of the structure. Okay, now Tanya Kavase de Rav Yehuda. Now we have a brayso to support Rav Yehuda, who had quantified the three-way machlokus in our Mishnah between Rabbi Meir, the Chachamim, and Rabbi Shimon. The brayso says as follows: Amar Rebbe kishahayinu lomdim Torah eitzel Reb Shimon b'Takoa. When we would study Torah, I guess Reb Shimon had a yeshiva in Takoa. Hayinu ma'alin shemen va'aluntis migag legag u'migag lechatzer u'michatzer lechatzer u'michatzer lekarfeif u'mikarfeif lekarfeif acher ad shehayinu magin eitzel hamayan shehayinu rochtzin bo. That the brayso says that Reb Shimon permitted to us to carry anointing oil and towels from rooftop through different kinds of enclosed areas, which were disparate in their logistical makeup, and were also disparate in their ownership, but because they were all considered to be, according to Reb Shimon, public or semi-public areas, they were permitted for us to carry from one to the other, assuming that these were all enclosed areas, or at least halachically enclosed areas. So he let us carry from one gag to another, from a gag to a chutzner, from a chutzner to another chutzner, from a chutzner to a karfeif, which is an enclosed lot, which is used primarily for storage, and from karfeif to another karfeif, until we would get to, and we would be able to continue carrying through these enclosed areas until we actually, in other words, we couldn't do this in a Rishus Harabim, obviously, because it was Shabbos, so we carried them through these different areas until we got to the Mayan, until we got to the wellspring where we were rinsing ourselves off on Shabbos. And after rinsing ourselves off, we could dry ourselves off with a towel, and we could place anointing oil on us. So Reb Shimon was very liberal, and you see that Rav Yehuda is correct in his surmisal of Reb Shimon that he allows transferal from all the different kinds of enclosed areas that are publicly owned. And Amar Rav Yehuda, Maisa b'shas sakana v'hayinu malin sefer Torah mechatzer legag u'megag lechatzer mechatzer lekarfev likrosbo. Now the second part of this brayso is a statement by Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, I will also indicate to you that it is permitted to carry from one domain to another, just like the story with Rabbi Shimon, because when there was a time of sakana, when there was a time of religious persecution, we couldn't carry a Sefer Torah outside in the Rishus Harabim overtly. So what we did was we surreptitiously carried it through these different alleyways and courtyards and rooftops and so forth, and in order to get it to the Beis HaKnesses so that we could read the Sefer Torah. So this too is an indication that we paskin like Reb Shimon. But the Gemara,
how did they get it into the Beis HaKnesses?
Beis HaKnesses was adjacent to one of those domains, and the Beis HaKnesses also is considered to be it's not a Rishus HaYachid. It's considered to be an enclosed public area.
And there's nothing left them, but they couldn't bring it from their house into the chutzner because
you'd have to say that the Sefer Torah was in one of these domains. It was either lying in a chutzner from before Shabbos or in a gag before Shabbos. You're exactly right, Bob. Exactly right. So Amru Lo Ein Shasa Sakana Raya. So the rabbi said back to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't bring proof that we go like Reb Shimon just because it was permissible at a time of sakana. and a time of religious persecution, the rabbis could have been more lenient in order to permit Jews to practice their religion. So while the first story of Reb Shimon, with the case of the rinsing yourselves off at the wellspring, is proof to Reb Shimon's position, this story does not prove that we necessarily paskin like Reb Shimon. Next, Reb Shimon Omer, Echad Gagin V'chulei. Now let's go, the last part of our Mishnah had clarified Reb Shimon's opinion that you can transfer from a Gag to a Chatzar to a Karfif, etc. Amar Rav, Halacha Kereb Shimon, V'hu Shalo Irvu, Avol Irvu Lo. So Rav says the halacha is like Reb Shimon, that we do allow you to carry utensils that were in a Chatzar to a Gag and to a Karfif, etc., provided that the place where the utensil begins, let's say it starts off in a Chatzar, and you want to transfer it to a Gag, provided that there was no Eruv made in that Chatzar. Because if there was an Eruv made in that Chatzar, the Gazrinu Dilma Asi Lafu Keimani Debatim L'Chatzar. Our concern is that if we allow you to carry from one Chatzar to another, and the Chatzar A, where you're starting, is they had made an Eruv in Chatzar A, then the Eruv permits not only utensils to be carried inside that Chatzar that were resting in the Chatzar, but it also permits utensils that were in the house. And the concern is as follows. If the house has utensils being taken out of it into Chatzar A, then we're scared that you may inadvertently not only carry the tricycle from Chatzar A to Chatzar B that was in the backyard, but you may also take out a garment or a book or a food item that was in the house. And that for sure cannot be transferred from Chatzar A to Chatzar B. You can only transfer items that were in a real house, in a real Rishus HaYachid, if there was an Eruv made. If there was no Eruv made, then it was mamish going to be Aser. So therefore Rav says that Reb Shimon himself would agree to this, that when there is no, only when there's no Eruv made, so there's no concern that items from the bias are going to get into the Chatzar, do we allow you to carry items from Chatzar A to Chatzar B? Okay, Ushmuel Omar, Bein Irvu, Bein Shalo Irvu, V'chein Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Shmuel disagrees, and so does Rabbi Yochanan. Shmuel says that Reb Shimon is going to allow you to transfer from Chatzar A to Chatzar B, even if Chatzar A has its own Eruv. You'll just be careful. And Rashi takes out these words mi licheshcha, which means who whispered this to you. But Tosfos keeps the words in. Tosfos says that what it means is that what Rabbi Yochanan is really addressing Rav directly, and he's saying, who told you that? Who told you to make this distinction in Reb Shimon? Who whispered this into your ear? Sort of saying, like, where did you get this from? Reb Shimon says it, he doesn't make any distinction, and therefore the halach is without distinction, bein Irvu, bein Shalo Irvu. Whether they made an Eruv in Chatzar A, and whether they didn't make an Eruv, you'll always be able to transfer items from Chatzar A to Chatzar B, or from Chatzar A to Gag A, or whatever. So, Maskef la Reb Chisda l'Shmuel v'la Reb Yochanan. So, Reb Chisda challenges Shmuel and Reb Yochanan just logically. He says, Yomru shnei kelim b'chatzar echas zeh muter, b'chatzar echas, zeh muter v'zeh aser, or exclamation point, so to speak. In other words, his question is like this. How are you going to distinguish? You could have two identical items that are in Chatzar A. One at the inception of Shabbos was resting in the Chatzar, and one at the inception of Shabbos was inside the house. How are you going to be able to distinguish between the two? How are you going to know the difference? Right? It's a logical question for him to ask. So the Gemara says, Reb Shimon l'taimei de lo gazer. Reb Shimon is consistent, that he's not concerned about that. Reb Shimon holds, listen, you know what? You'll keep inventory. You'll keep track of the different things that you have within your chatzar. Ditnan, Amar Reb Shimon lamaha davar doime, l'shalosh chatzeros hapsucha zu lezu, psuchos l'rishus harabim, the irvu shtei achitzonos im ha'imtzois. Hi muteres imoin, behin muteres ima, ubeis achitzonos asurim zu imzu. So the halacha is as follows. The halacha is that when you have three courtyards, and we've seen this case before, three courtyards that are all in a row, you've got A, B, and C, they're all connected to each other, and B is in the middle. And for whatever reason, A and B made an Eruv together, they incorporated together, B and C made an Eruv together, but A and C did not make an Eruv. So Reb Shimon says, it's mutter to carry from A to B, from B to A, it's mutter to carry from B to C and from C to B, but you can't carry items that were in houses from A to C, because A and C did not make an Eruv. So v'lo gazar dilma asi lafu kemani dehachatzer lahachatzer. Hachanami lo gazrin dilma asi lafu kemani debatim lachatzer. And just like Reb Shimon is not concerned that you may end up, listen, if we allow you to carry items from A to B, then what's to stop you from carrying that very same item that started in A and carrying it over to C?
How do you know which item is in B?
How do you know which item is which, right? Maybe it's, everyone's got a tricycle in their backyard, so if we let you carry the tricycle from A to B, maybe you'll end up carrying that same tricycle from B to C. Reb Shimon says, no, you'll keep track. You'll know which one started in A and which one started in B, and you'll be careful not to get stuff that started in A and then to get it ending up in C.
It's assumed that you can go directly from A to C without going through B?
You can. Of course you have to go through B to get to C.
So you have to go through B.
Yeah, sure. But the point is that you're not concerned because you're allowed to transfer stuff from A to B. And you're allowed to transfer stuff from B to C. You just can't get stuff from A to C via B, because A and C did not make an ERU. So the issue, therefore, is maybe you should be concerned like the Chachamim are, but because the Chachamim argue with Reb Shimon. The Chachamim say, as we'll see momentarily, that because A and C did not make an ERU, not only can you not transfer items from A to C, but you cannot transfer items from A to B either, lest you come to take something that started in A and get it over to C. Right? But Reb Shimon's not worried about that. Reb Shimon says, you know what? We trust you. You'll keep track of what's what, and you'll make sure that A doesn't end up in C. And in a similar vein, here too, we're not worried that if you made an eruv in Chatzar A, we're not worried that something that started in the house in Chatzar A is going to end up in Chatzar B. Only stuff that started in the Chatzar in Chatzar A will end up getting into Chatzar B, and that's fine.
Because otherwise you're knocking out the whole concept of error for those guys that made the corporation.
Of course, because but remember, according to Reb Shimon, the whole institution of eruv is only to enable you to get stuff out of the house into the Chatzar. But to get stuff from one Chatzar to another, he doesn't require an eruv. Right? Okay, we got that? That's a very important, crucial point. Yeah. Crucial point, okay? Now, Masav Reb Sheshis. So Reb Sheshis challenges this, and he says, Reb Shimon Omer, look at the following brisa. Reb Shimon says, Echad gagos, echad chaseros, ve'echad karfefos, rishus echas hein lekelim sheshavsu b'sochan, ve'lo lekelim sheshavsu b'soch habayis. Now, who is he challenging now? You'll see in just a moment, he's challenging Rav. Now, Rav was of the opinion that if you made an eruv in Chatzar A to allow you to get stuff from the house into the Chatzar, then you cannot transfer items from Chatzar A to Chatzar B, even according to Reb Shimon. So look at the brisa carefully, says Reb Sheshis. Right? The brisa says that you can transfer from a gag to a Chatzar, from a Chatzar to a gag, etc., according to Reb Shimon. But you can only transfer, they're only considered to be one domain for items that had started off at the inception of Shabbos in the Chatzar, but not for items that had started off in the house. So Iyamart bishlama di irvu hana de mishkachas lamoni debatim b'chatzar. So if you hold like Shmuel, this brisa makes very good sense. In Chatzar A, you may have items over the course of Shabbos that originated in the house or originated in the Chatzar, because you can make an eruv in Chatzar A, and the halacha still applies that you can transfer items from Chatzar A to Chatzar B. But ela iyamart b'shalo irvu heichi mishkachas lamani debatim b'chatzar. But if you're telling me that this halacha of Reb Shimon only holds when you did not make an eruv in Chatzar A, so then how could the brisa even talk about the possibility of transferring items that started in the house from Chatzar A to Chatzar B? If you didn't make an eruv, and that's the only time Reb Shimon's halacha applies, then how could utensils from the house get into the Chatzar to begin with? So the brisa makes no sense according to Rav. It's a kasha on Rav. So the Gemara says, "Hu mosiv la v'hu mefarik la b'kumsa v'sudra." Rav Sheshis asked this question, and he answered it and said, "You know what? Even if Chatzar A did not make an eruv, it is possible that somehow utensils from the house got out into the Chatzar on Shabbos. You know how? Because they were clothing, caps and kerchiefs. You put on your finest Shabbos cap before you left the house, and then you walk outside and you see, boy, it's a schwitz outside. it's too hot to wear this cap, and you take it off and you put it on the picnic table that's in your chutzner, and you leave it there. There's no Isser Shabbos there, and what the Brisa therefore is telling you is that even though there was no Erev in chutzner A, it is possible to get an item that originated in the house on Shabbos. Make sure that hat is not transferred into chutzner B. The tricycle, yes. But that cap that started in the house, make sure it doesn't get into Chatzar B. So therefore, you have no raya against Rav and in support of Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan from this brisa.
There's another way that the person did Vera and sitting there.
Perhaps the Gemara could have said that, but the Gemara says even in a permissible fashion, it's possible. That's a good point, Bob. Tashma. So now the brisa says, Anshe Chatzar va'anshe mirpeseh sheshachachu v'lo irvu. So now we have another brisa. The brisa says that if you have members of a chatzar and members of a mirpeset, now we have seen this before. This is just a couple weeks ago we saw this. You have a 2-story apartment building. So you have the second-story tenants and you have the ground floor tenants. And they didn't make an eruv with each other. Okay? They may have made an eruv for the upstairs separately and for the downstairs separately, but with each other they didn't make an eruv. And there's a mirpesus, which is like this upstairs patio for the upstairs residents. Kol shegavoa yutfachim lemirpeses, pachos mikan lechadzer. So if there's an adjacent pillar that is coming up from the ground right up against this apartment building, and there's an object resting on top of the pillar, if the pillar is higher than 10 tfachim, it's considered to be the purview of the people on the second floor, and therefore they can take items from the pillar and put items on the pillar. But if it's lower than 10 tfachim, it's considered to be the purview of the people on the ground floor. And we had a long discussion about this, which Rashi reminds us of, but I'm not going to go into that long discussion. But just remember that it's the purview changes depending upon whether it's higher than 10 tfachim or whether it's lower than 10 tfachim. Ba'medvar mamurim shahayu shel rabim ve'elu shel rabim shahayu elu shel rabim ve'elu shel rabim ve'irvu elu la'atzman ve'elu la'atzman. But when is this halacha true? Only when there were multiple tenants on the second floor, multiple tenants on the first floor, and the multiple tenants on the second floor made their own eruv together, they incorporated, and the tenants on the ground floor also made their own incorporation. O shel yechidim shein tzrichim la'arev. Or there could be one tenant on the second floor, one tenant on the ground floor, in which case no eruv is necessary for the separate floors, but they didn't make an eruv together. Aval, but then the brisa clarifies. Hayu shel rabim v'shachachu v'lo irvu. If, however, the upstairs tenants and the downstairs tenants also did not make an eruv among themselves, meaning the upstairs people did not make an eruv among themselves, the downstairs people did not make an eruv among themselves, so then Gag v'chatzar v'achsadra umirpeses kulan rishus echasein. Then it makes no difference whether you have a pillar that's higher, a pillar that's lower. According to the Chachamim, it's perfectly fine. You can take stuff off the pillar up from the ground floor because there are no holds barred. You're allowed to transfer from a Gag to a Chatzar, from a Chatzar to a Gag, as long as everything is publicly owned and there's not one incorporated domain here and a separate incorporated domain here. Right? So the Gemara now says, Taima de lo irvu. The whole reason that you're allowed to transfer items from the Chatzar to the Gag and so forth is because there was no eruv made. Ha-irvu, but if there was an eruv made, lo, then it wouldn't be permitted to transfer from the Gag to the mirpesis, from the mirpesis to the Gag, and so forth. So hamani, lo, question marks or exclamation point. So what is the question? The question is, like Rashi explains. One second. So 1 second. So that if they don't make an eruv, so again, what you're seeing over here is that the reason why it's forbidden to transfer items from the mirpeses to the chatzar, from the chatzar to the mirpeses, is only because the two domains made their own respective eruvin, which will allow private the house items to get out into the mirpeses and house items to get into the chatzar. And that's the reason why we don't allow you to transfer from the chatzar to the mirpeses and the mirpeses to the chatzar. But if they wouldn't have made an eruv, in which case you wouldn't have house items getting out into the merpesis or house items getting out into the chatzir, it would be permitted to transfer from the chatzir to the merpesis and the merpesis to the chatzir. So what do you see from here? You see that Rav is correct, that the only time that Reb Shimon's halacha holds true that you can transfer from one domain to another is when there was no eruv made, so that there's no concern that house items will get out into these chatzirs, into these public, more public areas. So the Gemara says, no, this is not Reb Shimon. This is the answer now. Hamani Rabbanani. This goes according to the Chachamim, not according to Reb Shimon. According to the Chachamim, they do hold of the concern that if you made an eruv and there are going to be household items getting out into the chatzir, then we don't allow you to transfer from one chatzir to the other. Because as I mentioned to you before, in that case of three chatzirs in a row, and A and B made an eruv, and B and C made an eruv, but A and C did not make an eruv, the Chachamim are machmir, and they say you cannot transfer items from A to B because you may end up taking that item that started in A and have it end up in C. So you see that the Chachamim are concerned that you may get confused and you won't be able to keep track of items. So that's why the Chachamim are more machmir than Reb Shimon, and the Chachamim agree that if you made an eruv in Chatzir A and you made an eruv in Chatzir B, then even items that started at the inception of Shabbos out in the Chatzir cannot be transferred from A to B, lest you come to transfer house items from A to B. But Reb Shimon himself is not concerned about that. And that's why this brayso is not a problem to Reb Shimon, because this brayso goes according to the Chachamim. Zak the Gemara Dika Nami, and you can infer this also from the language of the brayso itself. Delo katani karfe fumavoi shmamina, because this brayso does not mention other domains other than a chatzir and a gag, or a chatzir and a mirpeses. Now remember, according to Reb Shimon, you're allowed to transfer from all enclosed public areas to all enclosed public areas. You can transfer from a gag to a chatzir, to a karfev, to a mavoi. They're all okay. According to the Chachamim, like we clarified according to Rav Yehuda yesterday, according to the Chachamim, you can only transfer from a gag to a chatzir and a chatzir to a gag. So this brayso, which only talks about a gag and a chatzir, or I should say a chatzir and a mirpeses, is clearly going according to the Chachamim and not according to Reb Shimon, because according to Reb Shimon, it should have opened it up further and said that that you can that everything is a rishus echas, everything, not just an achsadra and a mirpeses and a chatzer, but rather even a karfeif as well. Okay, Tashma, come and listen. Chamesh chatzeros hapsucha zulazu. Now let's look at the next brayso. You have 5 chatzers in a row, okay, and upsuchos lemavoi, and each chatzer opens up into an adjacent mavi that runs along the length of all 5 chatzers. And we've seen this illustration as well back in the Samachs, I think. V'shachachu kulam v'lo irvu. Now all of them forgot. No one made an eruv. So there's clearly the mavoi is an area that is non-incorporated. Okay. Asur lahachnis ulahotzi michatzer lamavoi umin hamavoi lachatzer. Then you're not allowed to carry items from the chatzer to the mavoi, or from the mavoi to the chatzer. The kelim sheshavsu bechatzer mortul lotaltalan bechatzer uvemavoi aser. Items that had started off in the chatzer at the inception of Shabbos, you are allowed to carry them within the chatzer. That's no problem, but you're not allowed to carry them out into the mavoi. The Rabbi Shimon matir, and that's according to the Chachamim. The Chachamim hold that a chatzir and a mavoi is like a chatzir to a karfeif, and therefore you're not allowed to transfer from, because they're too disparate in their utilities, and therefore you're never allowed to transfer from a chatzir to a mavoi unless you make an eruv.
But they can go from chatzir to chatzir. They can
go from, but we're not talking about that now, because we don't have any indication from the brayso that there's even a doorway from one chatzir to another. So that's why I deliberately did not. No, did it say zulazu? Oh, I'm sorry. Hapsucha zulazu. I skipped that. You're right. You're absolutely right, Alan. Can they carry from one chaser to another? Yes. Then yes, you're right. The Reb Shimon matir, but Reb Shimon permits even carrying from Reb Shimon says you can even carry items that were in the chatzir out into the mavoi, and items that were in a mavoi out back into the chatzir. Why? Shahay Reb Shimon Omer kolzman shehein shel rabim v'shachachu v'lo irvu gag v'chatzir v'achsadra u'mirpeses v'karfev u'mavoi kulan rishus echasein. Because Reb Shimon was of the opinion that any time you have items that are in one of these enclosed public areas, such as a gag, a chatzar, a mavui, a karfeif, and an achsadra, you can always transfer from one to the other. So that's Reb Shimon Shita. Now, Taima, so the Gemara says, let's be medayik here. Taima de lo irvu. But that's only because these chatzars did not make an eruv, because it says explicitly in the Brisa, v'shachachu kulam v'lo irvu. They forgot, no one made an eruv. Ha irvu lo. So the Gemara says, so you see from here that if the 5 eruvs would have incorporated with each other, and they would have made an eruv with each other, so then, but they just didn't incorporate the mavui, so then, they would not be allowed to carry, even according to Reb Shimon, out into the mavui. So you see from here that according to Reb Shimon, it's a proof to Rav that according to Reb Shimon, if you made an eruv in any one of the individual chatzers, so then it would be a problem to carry an item from the chatzar out into the mavui, lest you come to carry a household item from the chatzar into the mavui. So the Gemara now says, "Milo irvu lo irvu chatzeros bahadi hadade." No, the Gemara says, what does it mean that they didn't make an eruv? It means they didn't make an eruv with each other. But ha chatzar ubatim irvu. But they did make an eruv in the individual chatzars. In other words, A, B, C, D, and E did not incorporate with each other. But what they did, in order to allow them to carry out into the mavui, because if they incorporated with each other, they would be allowed to carry out into the mavui. But what they didn't do is, but what they did do is that they did make their respective individual eruvin to allow them to carry from their respective homes to their respective chatzar. And even so, Reb Shimon, and really what Reb Shimon is telling you is a chiddush, that even when they made an eruv, and even when it's possible for a household item to get out into the chatzar, it's still permitted, according to Reb Shimon, to carry from the chatzar to the mavui that has not been incorporated. Why? Because, as we said, like Shmuel says, and Rabbi Yochanan, because we're not concerned, because you're going to keep track. You'll keep track of what started in the house and what started in the chatzar. Frek the Gemara v'halo irvu katani. But it says they didn't make an eruv. So Milo irvu lo nishtatfu. What it means, they didn't make an eruv, not the individual chatzars did not make an eruv, but that they did not incorporate the mavui. That's what it means. So that the mavui clearly is an unincorporated public area. And still, according to Reb Shimon, it's permitted to carry from chatzar to mavui because they're both considered to be public areas, public enclosed areas. And as far as household items, you will keep track. So that's one way of explaining the brisa. The other way of explaining the brisa is v'ibais ema Reb Shimon ledivreihem derabanan ka'amar lahu. That Reb Shimon was really simply responding to the Chachamim l'shita sam, according to their shita. Meaning, he was saying as follows: Lididi lo shna irvu v'lo shna lo irvu. Maybe in reality, what the brisa means to say is that we're talking about a case where even the individual chatzars did not make an eruv. And Reb Shimon is saying to the Chachamim is as follows: it makes no difference to me whether the individual chatzars made an eruv or not. Why? Because I hold that even if household items end up in the chatzar, you'll be able to keep track which item started in the chatzar, which item started in the house. But ela l'didchu odu limihas. But according to you, Chachamim, who hold that if they made eruvs individually, in which case household items will end up in the chatzar, then it's not permitted to carry from the chatzar to anywhere else, because you may end up getting a household item out there. But odu limihas, but at least admit to me, Chachamim, dehecha de lo irvu, reshus echasi. At least admit to me that when the chatzars did not make individual eruvs, so there's no concern of household items ending up in the chatzar, in the individual chatzars, at least admit to me that you can carry the tricycle from chatzar A out into the mavui. Will you admit that to me? And then the Amrulei Rabbanan lo, and the Chacham said to him, no. You, Reb Shimon, hold that you're allowed to transfer from a chatzar to a mavui because it's called one domain. We, however, say shtei reshuyosein. We hold, however, that they have a status of two different domains. The only time that we say that you can carry from one unincorporated enclosed area to another unincorporated enclosed area is when it's from a gag to a chatzar, from a chatzar to a gag, because the utilities are similar. But from a chatzar to a mavui, or from a chatzar to a karfeif, where the utilities are totally different, there we do not agree that it is okay to transfer from one domain to the other because they're not incorporated. Now, Let's do the last thing, the Amar Mar. Let's go back to this brisa for just a second. If you go back to what the Chachamim had said in the brisa, they had said uvemavoi aser. The Chachamim had said that in the mavui itself, it's aser. Now, what does that mean in the mavui itself, it's aser? That you're not allowed to carry items from one chutzner to the mavui. The kelim sheshavsu b'chutzner, mutal l'taltam b'chutzner, you can carry, however, items in the chutzner, but you cannot carry them uva mavoi aser, but you're not allowed to carry them from the chutzner to the mavoi. And then it said, furthermore, uva mavoi aser. It said also in the mavoi, which implies kelim that were in the mavoi before Shabbos cannot be carried in the mavoi itself. Lema misayeh leila Rabbi Zera amarav, the Amar Rabbi Zera amarav, mavoi shelo nishtatfu bo ein metaltalin ela b'dalet amos. That Reb Zera said in the name of Rav that when you have a mavui that was not incorporated, even a tricycle that was in the mavui from before Shabbos cannot be moved more than dalet amos. Okay, that's what Rav says. Even in the shita of the Chachamim, even though the Chachamim say that you're allowed to carry freely more than dalet amos in a chutzner and in a gag that is enclosed, but a mavui is too much of a public area, and therefore you cannot carry more than dalet amos in a mavui. So you can infer that from this brisa. So the Gemara says no. Ema vil ula mavui aser. The Gemara says no. It's not saying uvim mavui aser, which means that items that started in the mavui cannot be carried in the mavui, but rather what it's saying is to transfer items from the chutzner to the mavui is what is aser. And the brisa really is not addressing the halacha of carrying items that started in the mavui itself. So the Gemara says, Hainu Reisha. But that's exactly what the Reisha says. If you look back at the brisa, it says that if they didn't make an eruv with each other, says the brisa, Asur lahachnes ulahotzi min chatzar lamavui min hamavi lachatzar. You're not allowed to transfer items from the chatzar to the mavui and from the mavui to the chatzar. Now, you're telling me that uvemavui asur of the next line means the exact same thing. So why is it necessary for the brisa to repeat itself? That's redundant. So the Gemara answers, I'll tell you why. Mishnah Yisera is tzrichale. We need an extra line in the brisa to clarify the following point. Mahu detema ki pligi rabbanan alei Reb Shimon hani mili heicha de'irvu. Because you might have thought, by just looking at the first line, that the reason why the Chachamim disagree with Reb Shimon is because in a case where the various chatzers, the individual chatzers made eruvin in such a way that they allow household items to get out into their chatzers, that's when the Chachamim say you cannot carry items from the chatzar into the mavoi, lest you come to carry out a household item. But if they didn't make their respective eruvs, maybe the Chachamim would agree to Reb Shimon that you can transfer items from a chatzar to a mavoi, since there's no concern of household items getting out into the mavoi. Kamash Malan, so comes along the second line of the brisa to clarify. Not only do the Chachamim have the concern that items that start in the house will end up being carried outside the chutzner, that's not the only concern. Even items like the tricycle that started in the chutzner at the inception of Shabbos cannot be carried into the mavoi, because the Chachamim disagree fundamentally with Reb Shimon, who says that all enclosed public areas are the same. The Chachamim say no. We agree that Gag and chutzner are the same, but a chutzner and a mavoi are not the same. And therefore, even if it started in the chutzner, you cannot transfer from the chutzner to the mavoi. And this is where we'll hold it, and you have a wonderful guten Erev Shabbos and a beautiful Shabbos. And a guten Chodesh tonight.